On Monday, Kimberly Guilfoyle met with the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection. The former Trump advisor appeared after abruptly ending a meeting with the committee back in February. Guilfoyle, who is engaged to Donald Trump Jr., spoke at the January 6th rally right before the mob stormed the Capitol. CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins us now for more on this. Robert, welcome. Thank you for being with us. So what do we know about Guilfoyle's meeting, this closed-door meeting with the House Select Committee yesterday, and what exactly do they want to know from her, do you think?
Caitlin, it's a step forward for the committee in terms of the meeting and this interview even happening. It was just a few weeks ago that CBS News first reported that Kimberly Guilfoyle's Zoom session, an online session with the January 6th committee, went into disarray, fell into kind of a chaotic moment after they disagreed about ground rules. She was on a video conference with them, and then it just kind of ended. Her lawyers and the committee have been negotiating since. Based on our reporting, she has then decided to come in for a face-to-face meeting. It went on for hours. She's a key figure because she's linked to what happened at the rally at the Ellipse near the White House on January 6th. Has knowledge of the organization of that rally, of fundraising related to that rally, and that event has become part of the investigation, a central point, a target for investigators on the House side.
Yeah, and you mentioned this is not her first appearance, and the last appearance kind of, as you describe, ended with her kind of abruptly ending the meeting. Do you know if anything changed this time around, if there were any sort of, arrangements made that made her comply this time around?
These are sometimes tension-filled discussions between lawyers and witnesses and committee members. But at the end of the day, the committee has subpoena power. And if they want you to come talk voluntarily or via subpoena, you essentially have to show up. If not, you risk facing criminal contempt charges. We've seen that for Steve Bannon, for example, the former White House chief strategist who has declined to cooperate with the committee in any way. But sometimes witnesses want to have the scope of questions outlined for them. It's like any kind of reporting interview in a sense. You don't want to give terms if you're an investigator, but you sometimes can give some points so they can prepare at least to address certain topics.
And Bob, I want to ask you about someone you've reported a lot on. That's attorney John Eastman. He wanted to block the certification of the 2020 election, and he's trying to keep a trove of documents from the committee. Do you know on what basis that is, and what do we know about those documents?
John Eastman is this conservative lawyer who authored a two-page, six-part memo that's widely called the Eastman memo, and many have called it a blueprint for a coup. And it was about trying to push the certification out of congressional hands and into the hands of states where they could then send alternate electors back to Congress and elect Donald Trump to a second term. Eastman was an outside lawyer at the time, not on the White House staff, but he was working closely with then-President Trump. As we've reported, he was in the Oval Office on January 4th, 2021, telling Vice President Pence, you can do this. You have the power to do this. Pence was resistant. So were Pence's lawyers and aides like Mark Short and Chief Counsel Greg Jacob. Eastman has 37,000 emails the committee wants, but he is citing attorney-client privilege, saying he does not need to reveal these emails because he was working closely with his then-client, Donald Trump, the President of the United States. And this is part of a long-standing battle about attorney-client privilege on the Eastman front, and then Trump has also, on his front, cited and asserted executive privilege as a reason for him not to give up documents. The Trump side of the equation has gone all the way up to the Supreme Court. He has been forced to produce documents just weeks ago. And so this Eastman question, though, is critical for the committee because they want to figure out who was Eastman talking to, emailing, text messaging with, because they're not really still sure of the full scope of his activity.
Yeah, a lot of really critical figures here. I mean, is there anybody else that the committee is hoping to talk to in the next days and weeks? And can you kind of give us a timeline for when the committee is hoping to wrap up its work, when they hope to wrap up witnesses, and when we might even see public hearings?
What's interesting is that this committee was supposed to have public hearings essentially right now. in April, starting in May, perhaps at the latest. Now the timeline is a bit TBD, to be determined. What I'm watching as a reporter is, who do they call as public witnesses? They've done all of these depositions behind closed doors. They're trying to piece together what happened. They need to tell a story to the American people at the end of the day that's coherent, that's understandable. In the Watergate hearings 50 years ago, you had John Dean, the White House counsel, put his hand in the air and say, I'm going to tell the truth about what happened inside the Nixon White House. Who could tell the truth publicly on camera this time around? Maybe it's Judge Ludig, the retired conservative judge. He told CBS News today that he's willing to publicly testify. And that could be something the committee pays attention to, because Judge Ludig, as you might recall, was involved with helping then Vice President Pence draft his letter on January 5th and 6th to try to say to the then president, no thanks, can't do what you want me to do in terms of blocking or delaying the certification. Yeah, there have been so many moving parts that I think public hearings would give the audience and Americans a good chance to kind of see all of the characters involved here. As always, Bob Costa, thank you for your reporting and for joining us and making this all a little bit easier to understand. We appreciate your time. Thank you, Caitlin.